The applause began before I reached the stage. It was polite. Structured. The kind of applause belongs to uniforms and ceremonies, not to people. I kept my eyes forward. The overhead lights reflected faintly off the polished floor. Somewhere in the front row sat my family. My mother clutching her purse too tightly, my aunt whispering reassurances. My father sitting with his arms crossed the way he had at every school award ceremony I'd ever had. I didn't look for him. I had learned early that if I looked for approval, I would find critique instead. The ambush in Kandahar hadn't felt like bravery. It had felt like confusion. Dust exploding upward. Radio screaming. The convoy halting too suddenly. I remember the heat inside the vehicle and the unnatural silence after the first blast. Like the world inhaled and forgot how to exhale. I remembered doing what I was trained to do. Securing the perimeter. Dragging a wounded corporal behind the axle of a disabled truck. Speaking calmly into a radio that kept spitting static back at me. I didn't feel heroic then. I felt responsible. My name was called. I stood. As I stepped forward, I heard it low but not quite enough. She got lucky. Not brave. It wasn't said with cruelty. That would have been easier. It was said with dismissal. A few heads turned, unsure if they'd heard correctly. I didn't turn. My spine remained straight. I counted my steps the way I used to count breaths during physical training. 2, 3. The medal was pinned over my left breast pocket. The ribbon brushed against my collarbone. The citation was read. For wounds sustained under enemy fire while maintaining operational command presence. Applause again. I kept my face neutral. The program should have moved on. But it didn't. The general remained still. He didn't shuffle papers. He didn't nod to the next officer. Instead, he looked directly toward the front row. His gaze was calm, steady, not theatrical, not angry, just deliberate. Before we proceed, he said evenly. There is a clarification I believe this room deserves. The temperature shifted. Not physically. Social aide stepped forward and handed him a thin file. I felt something tighten in my stomach, not fear exactly. Recognition. There had been an investigation after the ambush. Intelligence officers had interviewed several of us. Questions about route changes. About who knew what and when. At the time, they told us it was routine. The general opened the folder. Our convoy's location was compromised prior to departure, he continued. Initial assessment suggested internal leak. That assessment was incorrect. A murmur spread through the audience. The breach originated from civilian communications. Specific deployment timing and route details were shared outside secured channels. Those communications were intercepted. He paused, not for effect, but because the sentence required precision. The origin of those communications has been traced through extended family correspondence. The air went thin. I heard my mother's sharp inhale. My aunt's whisper died mid-word. The general did not raise his voice. In the weeks before deployment, information about convoy adjustments was discussed casually with relatives. Messages forwarded. Photos shared. Individuals unaware of operational sensitivity repeated details in unsecured conversations. His eyes returned to my father. No evidence suggests intentional collaboration with hostile forces. However, negligence has consequence. My father's posture changed slowly. His arms uncrossed. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked smaller, not humiliated, not accused of espionage, but suddenly aware of gravity. Gasps rippled through the rows behind them. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something colder. The general closed the file. For clarity, he said. His voice firm but restrained. Surviving an ambush made possible by compromised information is not luck. It is discipline under fire. Silence. Then applause. Less automatic this time. More conscious. He stepped back. The ceremony resumed. Another name was called, but the room had shifted. Something invisible had been reordered. I returned to my seat without looking at my family. For years, my father had framed my achievements as accident. A scholarship was good timing. My commission was political. My promotion was quota. Luck was easier for him than effort. Now luck had been dissected in front of witnesses. After the ceremony, people approached me carefully. Handshakes felt different, measured, almost apologetic. A captain squeezed my shoulder and said nothing. It was enough. My family waited near the exit. My mother's eyes were glassy. My aunt wouldn't meet my gaze. My father stood rigid, color drained, hands hanging useless at his sides. He didn't defend himself. For the first time in my life, he seemed unsure of the narrative. I realized then that I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want acknowledgement. What I wanted had already happened. The truth had been placed on record, not dramatized, not weaponized, documented. Investigators would follow up, questions would be asked. There would be interviews, uncomfortable ones. Some relatives would learn what operational security actually means. There would be consequences, administrative, perhaps legal, but none of that felt personal anymore. Later that night, alone in my quarters, I removed the Purple Heart and placed it on the desk. It wasn't heavy because of metal, it was heavy because of context. I thought about the moment in the convoy when the dust settled, and I realized I was still alive. I hadn't felt lucky then. I had felt steady. That steadiness returned now, not loud, not victorious, just grounded. My father's words would echo for a while. They always did. But now they existed alongside something else, an unmistakable, official correction. I wasn't smaller anymore. Not because he had been exposed, but because I no longer needed him to understand. Outside, the base was quiet. Inside, something had settled into place. Bravery, I realized, doesn't argue.